Day 4 would see us leave Pistonia and start heading towards the Mediterranean and the Italian city of Trieste. We'd take 2 stops along the way, one at a castle and the other at some caves. But before then, I would have one of the strangest breakfasts of my life. We stayed at a hostel that was, I think, an old school at one time, and we were the only people that actually took up the breakfast, where we had a fine meal of warm yogurt, stale cereal, and watered down tang. So with our stomachs feeling a little queasy, we still decided to head out and make our way to the first stop. But before we got there, we got a ride on one of the most beautiful roads that I've ever seen. Before we knew it, we had arrived at Preyama Castle, a medieval building that has been perched on the side of the mountain for over 800 years. While there, we even got this great shot. After visiting the castle, we started heading back towards our main goal of Trieste. The climate started to thin out a little bit more, and you could definitely tell that it was drier. The mountains looked rockier, the trees looked different, and even the architecture started looking more Italian. We had some gravel road, and a type of forest that I haven't quite seen in Europe yet. This forest really started to remind me of home in Montana. I felt like I was in the power lines behind my house. We continued to follow these roads to the Skokjan Caves, which have one of the largest underground canyons in the world. Unfortunately, photography was prohibited, so I didn't get any photos of it. But here's what the outside of it looked like. We got back on the bikes and started to see the first signs of Italy. Shortly after, we crossed the border there. We were excited to be in the third country of the trip, Italy, but I don't think it had the same excitement for us, as we were immediately thrown on a fast-paced highway. From there, we got our first glimpses of the Mediterranean, and started the steep descent into Trieste. From there, we scrambled to try to find a hotel that came into the city with a fever, but it wasn't too long before we found one near the city center. I spent that night in rough shape, needing a rest day. We were only in Italy for a day, therefore we had to speed run the entire country. So we compiled a list of essential Italian items and activities to do, and we went at it. Let's check it. Pasta? Check. See if we can find the pizza. Oh, there it is. Check. Italy has also super extra buildings. Found one. Did we go to Venice? Yes, we did. And here comes Zoe enjoying a cappuccino. Let's see if we can get the final object of our list. Oh, there they are. Wow, we got them all. Thanks, Italy. Day 6 would see us leave Italy, hug the Mediterranean coast, and travel between 25 to 30 miles for the day's destination of Piran. After for the first time on our bike trip spending more than one night in our place, we were ready to load up once again and head out of Trieste. I really enjoyed my time in this city. The bright, colorful buildings and large hills reminded me a little bit of San Francisco. But with the city being surrounded by hills on every side, that means we once again had to climb out of it. So we started our journey uphill and out of Trieste. From there, we left the city relatively quickly and entered Slovenia. When we entered Slovenia, everything really started to look Mediterranean. Ongoing vineyards and olive trees everywhere. It did, however, start to become rainy throughout the day, but that didn't dampen our mood. It couldn't have been any much worse than day 2. We did a quick stop in the town of Koper, and it was definitely well worth it. From there, we started hugging the Mediterranean Sea for the very first time. It was a very surreal and rewarding experience considering where we started in Zagreb. We went down some narrow streets in the rain that probably weren't the best idea, but were rewarded with more great views. We even hit our first tunnel of the trip. But we also hit our first crash of the trip. Zoe slipped along this wet curve coming down a hill. Here's tunnel number 2, and this one was over half a kilometer long. And before we knew it, we entered the streets of Piran. We arrived at our hostel just minutes after a downpour of rain began. We got a little bit wet, but the timing definitely could have been worse. We spent the rest of the day wandering and enjoying this beautiful city, and started getting ready for the next day. Day 7 would see us leave Piran and start heading south, deeper into the Istrian Peninsula. We traveled about 30 miles, hugging the coast, until our destination for the day, of Porridge. Before we started the day, we stopped off at a local store, loaded up on produce and snacks, and planned out our route for the day. It wasn't long before we left the city of Piran and started on this bike path, hugging the Mediterranean coast. As we left Slovenia for the last time and entered Croatia, we were immediately met with more incline and more hills. At least there was a great view. Once over the hill of Pain, we are met with more picturesque villages perched on top of hills, a theme in both Croatia and Slovenia. Here's an example of a typical Istrian village in Croatia, looking ever more Mediterranean. We soon stopped in Novigrad for some burek and planned out where we were going to stay for the night. And then we were back to climbing yet again. The Mediterranean coast was a lot more hilly than we expected. After our second ascent of the day, we were hit once again with more gravel road. But that gravel road led us to something great. We went into a beach that was completely abandoned. Since we came in early May in the Istrian Peninsula, it was the off-season. And this beach that I'm assuming normally was really busy in the summer was left just for us. We stood in the sea for a little bit, hung out, and got a little bit of rest before we finally entered Porridge for the day. The water was blue, the skies were beautiful, and we sat back and enjoyed the sunset. We were going to stay in Porridge for the next 2 days and got some more well-deserved rest. Day wasn't a travel day, so we just kind of spent the day hanging out at the beach, exploring the city, eating some food. But I was also fostering a little bit of a stomach illness, so I had to pull out some of these for the day. But despite that, all in all, it was a pretty great day hanging out on the coast. Day 9 would see us reach closer to our final destination, Rijeka. We'd move away from the coast in the town of Porridge and head into the heart of the Istrian Peninsula. This was a 2-part journey for the day. We'd first stop off at the town of Pazin. We'd spend a couple hours there, and from Pazin we'd load up our bikes on the train and go up to Lupograf, where our Airbnb would be for that night. So we said goodbye to the Adriatic Sea and the coastal town of Porridge and started heading inland. And it wasn't long before it felt like we were deep into wine country. Vineyards were everywhere. Once again, today the roads were quiet. We only saw a couple cars on the first leg of our journey for the whole day. We were also greeted by grand villas everywhere. The houses were definitely bigger out here. We had our gravel roads for the day, but weren't too disappointed. There were a lot of bugs on this particular part of the journey, but the views of this area made up for it. We took a quick stop for some cheese and some crackers at this picnic table that was just on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. It was a welcome sight for our tired legs. Before we knew it, we were into the town of Pazin, where we were greeted by a pretty unwelcoming highway. But before long, we were there, and we were quick to go to the main attraction of Pazin. It was this massive castle perched over a hill, and the views did not disappoint. After spending a few hours exploring the town of Pazin, we headed up to the train station and waited for our ride. We also admired some old communist architecture here. And it wasn't long before we were on the train enjoying the sunset. This train was old and outdated, but had great charm to it. When we got off the train, we were met with one of the most beautiful sunsets that I've ever seen in my life. It was definitely a high point of the trip, and we were almost brought to tears by how beautiful and what an amazing place we were in at that time. However, a theme of this journey was high highs were soon met with low lows. The footage that you see here is us going down the wrong mountain, because our Airbnb was not on this one. We were in the middle of nowhere, and we had no idea where the actual address was. We soon had to backtrack, racing against daylight's last breath. During this time, we were also approached by a very fast and aggressive dog that was going right for Zoe. Luckily, I screamed just in the right time, and the dog made a maneuver away from us. We arrived to the Airbnb, shaken up, a little frustrated, and very tired. But the accommodations were great, and we got a restful night of sleep for our final day. Today was the final and hardest day of our journey. We would leave Lupograd, cross over the Uchka Mountains, before cruising down to our final destination of Rijeka. We would climb about 2,000 feet in the first 10 miles. We had been anticipating this final day for a while. I wouldn't lie when we say we were nervous, especially after our rough night last night. But nonetheless, we had to keep pushing forward. So we got up on our bikes and we head off again. The first part of the day would be almost all climbing. We soon took a pit stop and took a selfie here on what seemed like a big rock pile or something. Kind of looked like the moon. We then took that opportunity to go into our stretches for the day. And from there, we started the big climb. Grounded with great scenery and big views of the mountains up ahead, it was partially beautiful and partially intimidating at the same time. Nonetheless, we were in pretty good spirits and continued to climb. We soon hit a little bit of a flat part with a village and a beautiful pasture. We thought maybe this was a good sign of flatness, but nope, we were wrong. We continued to climb, and this time we were off paved roads. The roads clearly became more and more gravelly, and they also became steeper. After a few hours of climbing, we finally saw the high point. It was this ridge to the right in this shot. The roads started to get a little bit more gravelly and harder to ride on. They started to feel a little bit more like trails, and our bike touring started to feel a little bit more like mountain biking. Nonetheless, the poor road conditions, in a way, were actually a little bit fun. We were near the end of our climb, and we were feeling pretty good at it. We felt very proud of ourselves. And we soon hit the very top of our journey. As we crested our final ridge, the dirt road soon became a paved road, and the Mediterranean finally came into view. We had reached the high point of the journey, and from here down to Rijeka, it would all be downhill. For the next 3 to 4 miles, I don't think we pedaled once. It was a steep decline on smooth and winding roads, and it was one of the most fun parts of our entire journey. Seeing our final destination of Rijeka right at the bottom made us become very reflective of the past 10 days, of everything that we've done, what we've been able to accomplish,
all the sights that we've been able to see, food we've tried, and people we've met. This was the journey of a lifetime, and I have no doubts that on my deathbed, this will be something that I will remember. Rijeka kind of reminded me of a combination of Seattle with all the water and islands being like the Puget Sound, but the blue water and tall buildings of Rijeka, feeling a little bit more like the photos I had seen in Rio de Janeiro or in Honolulu. It wasn't long before we hit the very bottom of the sea and entered the city of Rijeka, our final destination. We took our final stop on the trip at a beach to look over the mountains that we had just overcame. We took a final swim in the sea, and after a long journey, it felt like finding an oasis in the desert. The waves washed away our tiredness, while the rocky beach reminded us of the challenges we've overcame. Swimming became the celebration at the end of our grand journey.
This kind of feels like the end of the trip, but it's definitely not. We have 4 more days.
Mentally, I'm like, oh, we're done now.
This is okay. I'm looking forward to the next couple of days, actually.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little nervous, but I'm looking forward to it.
What are you nervous about?
All of
Elevation days?
No, all of